It's January the 22nd day. Good afternoon and welcome. This is Africa Focus, taking a look at the latest news making headlines across the continent. My name is Cliff Ndubi. Tracy Dorcas is our sign language interpreter. Our 30 minutes of the broadcast begins now, but first, here are the highlights. It's back to school for pupils in Ghana, but educational stakeholders voice concerns over rising coronavirus cases. Just over 2 weeks since a long-running peacekeeping mission ended operations in Sudan, the country plunges into another pit of chaos. And we shall tell you why former South Africa President Jacob Zuma is legally required to appear before a judicial panel probing alleged graft during his time in office. Right, you can be part of this broadcast by telling us where you're watching from via our SMS line 111 across our social media handles, Switch TV Kenya on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Now we start. Temperature checks and mandatory wearing of masks as schools reopened in Ghana for 2021-2020 calendar after 10 months of closure. The shutdown of the academic calendar was in response to the outbreak of the coronavirus, which started in March last year. The country's education ministry and other stakeholders are ensuring adherence to the health protocols. However, other stakeholders are voicing concerns over what could be another outbreak in the country.
Temperature checks and mandatory wearing of masks as schools in Ghana reopened for the 2020-2021 calendar after 10 months of closure. The shutdown of the academic calendar was in response to the outbreak of the coronavirus in March last year. Many teachers and students in Ghana say that after several months of school closure due to COVID-19, it is good the government has reopened the schools for academic work, but they also voiced their concern over the country's rising cases.
You don't make time for learning unless maybe those students who are passionate and they know what they really want to do. So going back to school is very helpful. It's going to allow us to restart everything and we are going to get our academic life back on track.
The country's education ministry and other stakeholders are ensuring adherence to health protocols. However, there are mixed reactions as the government announced the reopening of schools a fortnight ago. It comes as COVID-19 cases have reportedly surged in this West African nation.
To affect their educational background, the children, some of them have even forgotten there was something called school. And I think it is now our duty to bring them up, to revive them. Psychologically, mentally, and everything.
For instance, I nearly lost my job because of the COVID, because I have to sit in the house. But you know, when you are working, you can't always give excuse because of your children. So I nearly lost my job. But my boss visited me and said, "Wow, your children." I said, "Because of." So we have to help the teachers so that we all feel free and go to our work.
The tally of currently infected people has nearly doubled in a month to 1,924 according to Ghana's health service. The overall figure of infections since the start of the pandemic is 58,000, but this is widely believed to be conservative as testing is low. President Nana Akufo-Addo warned that the country may return to a partial lockdown if residents do not adhere to safety and health protocols. Meanwhile, private schools have increased fees for the 2020-2021 academic year, a move that has raised concerns among parents and guardians. Reporting for Switch TV, my name is Joan Kutun.
To some legal matters now from South Africa is that former South African President Jacob Zuma is required to appear before a judicial panel probing alleged graft during his time in office. That is according to law professor Kathleen Powell. Zuma's legal team has announced that he will not testify despite a court application seeking to compel him to do so.
What the Constitutional Court's going to do. But while it says nothing, Zuma is still, under law, required to respond to the subpoena of the Zondo Commission. And if he doesn't, he's committed a crime for which he can be convicted and imprisoned. His problem is establishing the facts. And it looks like, without getting all medieval on former President Zuma, it looks like a fair amount of coercion is going to be needed to get this man to actually tell the commission what he knows. He's quite happy for the worst incidents of corruption in the country just not to get addressed. And this encourages his followers also to refuse to cooperate, but it also creates the impression that there's somehow an exceptional rule that applies to former President Zuma and his team. Former President Zuma's claim that he's not subject to the power of the commission is a lie. His claim that he doesn't have to answer questions is a lie. From what we've heard so far, his claim that he wasn't involved in corruption is a lie. And if he's able to sell that for long enough, then he is able to drive the kind of lawlessness that we saw in the United States. And I think it is time for the Zondo Commission and the country to draw a line.
Now let's head to Sudan, where at least 83 people have been killed in 2 days of ongoing clashes in the country, in the restive Darfur area, that is according to doctors. Just over 2 weeks since a long-running peacekeeping mission ended operations, the fighting reportedly pitted Arab against non-Arab tribes in West Darfur's capital, El Geneina, and is thought to have started as a local dispute before escalating into broader disputes between the militias.
More than 80 people have been killed in 2 days of ongoing clashes in Sudan's restive Darfur, just over 2 weeks since a long-running peacekeeping mission ended operations. The violence is the most significant fighting reported since the signing of a peace agreement in October, which observers hoped would end years of war that has left the vast western region awash with weapons. The fighting reportedly pitted Arab against non-Arab tribes in West Darfur's capital El Geneina and is thought to have started as local dispute before escalating into broader disputes between militias. The United Nations, a long-running presence in the nation, also expressed deep concerns on Sunday over the violence. Sudanese authorities have imposed a statewide curfew in West Darfur, while the Khartoum government dispatched a high-profile delegation to help contain the situation. Citing the Doctors' Union, the state-run Suna news agency said casualties were likely to increase as fighting continues. The union's local branch also said health facilities must be secured and transport made available. The head of Sudan's ruling body, Army Chief General Abdel Fattah, met top security chiefs to discuss the violence. They decided to send reinforcements to the region to secure civilians and key infrastructure, the cabinet announced on Twitter. The Sudanese Professional Association, an umbrella group which spearheaded protests against ousted President Omar al-Bashir, said the violence hit camps for people already displaced by conflict. Sudan is undergoing a rocky political transition after Bashir's April 2019 ouster. Bashir, who is currently in custody in Khartoum, is wanted by International Criminal Court for alleged genocide and war crimes in Darfur perpetrated more than a decade ago. The transitional government, a power-sharing arrangement comprised of generals and civilian figures, signed an October peace agreement with rebels group in Sudan's main conflict zones, including Darfur. But two groups refused to join the recent peace deal, including the Sudan Liberation Movement (SLM) faction led by Abdel Nur, which is believed to maintain considerable support in Darfur. The Sudanese Professionals Association said the violence in West Darfur shows the deficiencies of the peace agreement, which they say did not address the roots of the crisis in the region. Reporting for Switch TV, my name is Kanyaru Alex.
Thank you, Kanyaru Alex, for that story. Still on governance matters, but now coming from Tunisia, is that police fired tear gas and more arrests in the evening in Etadamen, a popular district on the outskirts of Tunisia, as Tunisia sees angry daytime protests against the government. This follows more than 4 days and nights of confrontations between police and dissatisfied youths. Robert Ouma has now filed this story.
Tunisia saw angry daytime protests against government on Tuesday following 4 nights of confrontations between the police and the defected youths that has led to hundreds of arrests. defying movements restrictions aimed at reining in coronavirus infections as students and activists flocked at the key boulevard in Tunisia, shouting slogans against poverty, corruption and police repressions. Protests in Tunisia and coastal city of Sfax, organized via social media, came after nights of rioting with young people lobbing rocks at the police in exchange for tear gas and more than 600 people arrested by Monday. Much of the unrest has hit the working-class neighborhoods where anger is boiling over soaring unemployment and political class accused of having failed to deliver good governance a decade on from the 2011 revolution. President Kais Saied urged the young Tunisians to refrain from further violence, even as social media posts called for new rallies. Tunisia's tourism-reliant economy shrank by 9% last year, even as consumer prices have spiraled and 1/3 of young people are unemployed. Large gatherings are banned due to coronavirus pandemic and the police have been deployed with an overnight curfew extended from 8 p.m. to 4 p.m. Tunisia's divided political leadership has stayed largely silent on the protest by the youth dismissed by many commentators as delinquents. Messages posted online on Tuesday called for protests to keep on going, and activists warned against demonstrations that were likely to continue until major actions were taken to address the root causes of the anger. The social unrest comes at a time of economic crisis worsened by the impact of COVID-19 pandemic that has deepened poverty. Widespread popular discontent is now driving many to leave. Robert Ouma, Switch TV News.
Thank you, Robert Ouma. Now away from the confrontations between people and the government in Tunisia and the people and government in Sudan. A lot is still happening in the continent, which we shall be bringing you after this short break. But what is coming up? We tell you how white clay is being eaten in the south of Madagascar to fight hunger. Right, welcome back. This is Africa Focus, taking a look at the news making headlines across the continent at this hour. My name is Cliff Ndubi. Tracy Dorcas is our sign language interpreter. Now, to some other news, Tunisia's Prime Minister Hichem Mechichi announced on Saturday a major cabinet reshuffle affecting 12 ministries in the wake of high-profile sackings. The new lineup, which does not include any women, must be approved by Parliament. A few hours before the announcement, Mechichi had met with President Kais Saied, who insisted the integrity of proposed ministers should raise no doubt, according to a statement from the presidency.
I have decided today to carry out a cabinet shuffle while preserving the philosophy of independent government supported by a political and parliamentary majority. The aim of this reshuffle is to achieve greater efficiency in the work of the government's policy and plans. This reshuffle is a diligent effort stemming from a sincere desire to unite this government team around action and achievements.
Right, now let's switch gears from Tunisia to Malawi, where President Lazarus Chakwera has announced or rather introduced new lockdown measures to contain a jump in confirmed cases and deaths from COVID-19. The restrictions include schools closure, a nighttime curfew, and no gatherings of over 50 people. The measures come 5 days after Chakwera declared a state of national disaster in response to the recent spike in COVID-19 cases. The new measures, he said, are being enacted because the situation is getting worse in the second wave of the pandemic.
The situation is becoming worse because we have seen an increase in the number of patients, said in the wards as well as in our clinics. It will give a relief to the way we have been handling the patients, because now what we will be doing, those that are severely sick, they will be coming here. Those that are a little bit stable, but their need of admission, they'll be going to Bingu National Stadium.
Now, away from that, in the drought-ravaged south of Madagascar, people are eating white clay mixed with tamarind to cope with the famine. The UN says it needs 35 million US dollars for emergency aid for the Indian Ocean island. Joy Morena has filed this story.
In the drought-ravaged south of Madagascar, people are filling their bellies with white clay mixed with tamarind to cope with famine.
My children didn't eat for 3 days and then died because I, their mother, did not manage to feed them. I'm sure it was the famine that killed them. It's not something else. It's not the disease, but famine. I left early in the morning and came back in the evening, and I saw the body of my child with his eyes open.
Dode Fandilava Noelesina, a 35-year-old farmer in the village of Fino-Ivor, says they call it survival soil because it allows the acidic taste of tamarind to seep into their mouths, which staves off the hunger.
If we had something to eat, if our saliva was enough, we would never have eaten that. But it's true that we didn't know that white clay was edible before. We tried to mix it and it worked.
The staple food in the arid region is usually cactus fruit. Rows of prickly green succulents surround villages, serving both as perimeter fences and food pantries. But after more than a year without rain, even the cacti have stopped producing fruit. The rare sight of their wilted skin attests to the grueling conditions prevailing in the region, around 62 miles west of the city of Fort Dauphin. In Fino-Ivor, villagers dread a repeat of a terrible drought that killed hundreds in the 1990s. To prevent a similar misfortune from befalling his family, Idami started eking out a living by selling firewood and charcoal.
We sell the wood for 100 ariary, about 0.021 euros. Only if I earn 1,000 ariary by selling these trunks, I can buy myself a bowl of rice. But that's not enough for a large family. And if we don't have money to buy rice, our children die from famine.
The father of 9 acknowledged the trade was not the most sensible for the environment, but said it allowed him to buy food for his family. Idami sells his charcoal for the equivalent of 30 US cents, also 25 euro centimes a bag, just enough for his family to eat cassava once a day.
Our life is like a small paradise since we have water. If it wasn't for this pump, we would be disgusted to live. We feel like vomiting all the time because we really have nothing to put in our mouths. But now the water becomes our meal.
Like their neighbors, they swallow clay mixed with tamarind between meals. 9 people starved to death in the nearby village of Ankilomavesti in September, around 10 kilometers away. Half of the population in the southern region of the Indian Ocean island, which has 1.5 million people, is currently in need of emergency food aid.
People could not go out because of the lockdown. The trucks, the bush taxis that have to commute were not allowed, and people stayed more or less in the villages. Add to that the food insecurity caused by climate change, which has been very severe this year.
Sécurité alimentaire provoquée par les changements climatiques qui ont été très sévères cette année.
Around 31 million euros, which is an approximate of 37.6 million US dollars, are urgently needed to feed the hungry. A few kilometers away in the town of Beraketa, Global Charity Action Against Hunger has set up a shop in coordination with the World Food Programme. The city attends to around 50 severely malnourished children, swollen bellies and lean legs, and 100 other patients each week. The children are at risk of death, especially if malnutrition is complicated by diarrhea, respiratory infection, or malaria. While droughts are not uncommon in the area, this dry spell has been compounded by climate impact. Mounting insecurity and livestock thefts have exacerbated poverty and complicated humanitarian relief efforts. Madagascar's government has deployed the military to distribute food and first aid in the area. Joy Maureen, Switch TV.
Right, from the southern part of the continent to the northern side of it is that Egypt unveiled Sunday ancient treasures found at the Saqqara archaeological site, which is in the south of Cairo. That is including sarcophagi, which is over 3,000 years old. A discovery that rewrites history, according to famed Egyptologist Zahi Hawass. Saqqara is a vast necropolis of the ancient Egyptian capital of Memphis, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, home to more than a dozen pyramids, ancient monasteries, and animal burial sites. A team headed by Hawass made the findings near the pyramid of King Teti, the first pharaoh of the 6th dynasty of the Old Kingdom.
Egypt unveiled ancient treasures found at the Saqqara archaeological site near Cairo, including sarcophagi over 3,000 years old, a discovery that rewrites history, according to famed Egyptologist Zahi Hawass. Saqqara is a vast necropolis of the ancient Egyptian capital of Memphis, a UNESCO World Heritage Site home to more than a dozen pyramids, ancient monasteries, and animal burial sites. A team headed by Zahi made the finds near the pyramid of King Teti, the first pharaoh of the 6th dynasty of the Old Kingdom.
In 2010, we found a pyramid of a queen, but we never know the name of the queen. Only yesterday, we found a temple for the pyramid, and we found the name of the queen. Her name was Nit. First time to know this name of the queen in the Old Kingdom.
More than 50 wooden sarcophagi dating to the New Kingdom were found in a burial shaft, according to Hawass. Hawass said his team had discovered a total of 22 shafts, including one containing a soldier with his battle axe resting beside him. A stone sarcophagus was also found, he added, as well as a papyrus around 5 meters long containing the 17th chapter of the Book of the Dead, masks, wooden boards, games the ancient Egyptians used to play.
And we found a papyri 5 meters long beside one of the coffins. One of the coffins belonged to a soldier. We found the axe that he used to fight. We found also games like the Senate game. If you win, you go to the other world, to the field of Yarrow. This is paradise of ancient Egypt.
A number of objects were displayed to the press. While evacuations of the site are ongoing, Egypt's Tourism and Antiquities Ministry had announced that major discoveries at Saqqara, where there had been a flurry of vacations in the recent years. The ministry said the team had also discovered the funeral temple of Queen Nerit, the wife of King Teti.
It was the wife and the daughter of King Teti. And this is the first time that we know that a king could marry his daughter, because only kings can do that, because Osiris married Isis. But we know about this practice in the New Kingdom only. But this is the first time that we have evidence about the marriage between the king and his daughter in the Old Kingdom.
The Saqqara site is also home to the Step Pyramid of Djoser, one of the earliest built in ancient Egypt. Later this year, and after several delays, authorities hope to inaugurate a new museum, the Grand Egyptian Museum at the Giza Plateau, home to the famed Giza pyramids. Egypt hopes archaeological discoveries will spur tourism, a sector which has suffered multiple shocks from a 2011 uprising to today's coronavirus pandemic.
Thank you, Harry Chimea, for that story. Now, South African liquor producers are being heavily affected by another alcohol ban accompanying lockdown restrictions. As small to medium enterprises, some craft breweries diversify their activities, like making hand sanitizers to stay afloat.
According to the Craft Brewers Association of South Africa, 30% of their 215 registered craft brewers in the association have had to close down during the first alcohol ban in March 2020. This sector employs up to 30,000 people. The Mad Giant Brewery had to retrench 30 staff, mostly from their restaurant, and only managed to retain 9 full-time employees. The company has started producing and now packaging alcohol-based sanitizer as a source of income since the beginning of the lockdown.
Yeah, last night, yesterday, day before. Every day you wonder how many days do you have left, and you just hope that something is going to come in and just get you, buy yourself another day or another week. So the anxiety and the fear is pretty real.
At Hopsend Brewery had to close their restaurant and only retained 3 staff members. The front of house manager, Chef Sifon Komo, and head waiter of the restaurant were reskilled to assist with brewery, scanning and packaging activities. The microbrewery also offers brewing and storage services to other brewers in order to secure additional income.
Yes, I do. I do miss brewing. It's my passion. It's what I train to do. It's kind of difficult to switch to something else when you know your passion is brewing.
Eben Uyes, like more than 200 South African brewers, says he's trying to survive a new alcohol ban in the country, half-heartedly pushing the dust that piles up on the counter.
A lot of craft breweries closed down during the lockdown, so we've been able to offer contract brewing or beer as a service where people can bring their brands and brew it here, where we are able to either brew it, ferment it, condition, as well as package it into either kegs or cans.
At 36, this chemistry graduate owned a trendy space at the same time microbrewery, bar and restaurant in the centrified district of Newtown in the center of the economic capital Johannesburg. Today his place is at standstill. It employs 9 people instead of 40. It's vasa full. In a few months, if the ban on the sale and consumption of alcohol is not lifted, the beer will go down the drain. South Africa was one of the first countries to ban alcohol to fight the COVID-19 pandemic, by thus limiting effectively the congestion of emergency services linked to road accidents, fights and other family violence. And the country did not hesitate to reimpose this measure in the face of the second wave at the end of December. Beer accounts for 3/4 of the alcohol consumed in South Africa, a country which is also a major producer of wine.
It was very hard because you come from maybe you have 1,000 to totally you've got nothing per week. Nothing at all. That's how it has been.
Part of the local industry, which employs around 30,000 people, is afraid it will not recover. Already 30% of the 215 microbreweries in the country have gone out of business since the first ban in March, according to the Association of Craft Breweries in South Africa. So some people use their imagination to try to convert, at least temporarily. In Benoni, about 40 kilometers east of Johannesburg, Julian Piana trained a few employees of his brewery restaurant in packaging beer in cans so that it could be stored and sold later.
Per liter of beer, we have a higher employment rate than the big commercial guys because it's a more manual, labor-intensive process. So the knock-on effect to our local communities is bigger if we need to close down, because then there's real job losses in local communities.
In the middle of the room behind a small improvised assembly line, former chef Sikong Gomo puts the lids on the aluminium counts. South Africa, by far the most affected country on the continent by the virus, has more than 1.3 cases and more than 36,000 deaths. One of the largest breweries, South African Breweries, announced that it was abandoning an investment of more than 136 million euros planned for 2021. On January 15th, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced an extension of the ban until further notice. Reporting for Switch TV, my name is Joan Kutun.
From South Africa by Joan Kutuni definitely brings us to the end of our broadcast this Friday. It's been a while doing this, but hopefully next week Joel Chacha will be coming back to take over from where I've left. I've been your host Cliff Ondubi, and Tracy Dorcas has been our sign language interpreter. My producer has been Harriet Chimea, and my director has been Rose Roberts. See you some other time. Do have a good afternoon.